backpacking to heartbreak, unraveling the fate of Grace Millane. Grace Millane, a young woman from the UK, embarked on what was meant to be the adventure of a lifetime. Backpacking across New Zealand, she was eager to explore, meet new people, and create lasting memories. But instead of excitement, her journey ended in tragedy. What began as a casual Tinder date quickly turned into something much darker. That night, Grace vanished, and her family's worst fears began to unfold. Her final moments, a night that should have been nothing more than a fun date, became the start of a nightmare. But what really happened? Was it just a tragic accident, or was there something far more sinister lurking behind this seemingly innocent encounter? To see how Grace's adventure took a dark turn, let's rewind to those final days leading up to the fateful night. It was late November 2018 when Grace Millane, a 22-year-old British backpacker, found herself in the bustling streets of Auckland, New Zealand. She had just graduated from the University of Lincoln with a degree in advertising and marketing, and now she was taking a year-long backpacking trip to explore the world. Grace had already spent 6 weeks traveling across South America, experiencing new cultures, meeting people, and sharing her journey with family and friends back home. On November 20th, she arrived in New Zealand, filled with excitement and wonder. She was on her own now, surrounded by the beauty of the country's vast landscapes. Grace had been in Auckland for just a few days, enjoying the sights and meeting fellow travelers, when she made plans to meet someone new. Grace had connected with Jesse Kempson, a 26-year-old man she had matched with on Tinder. They'd exchanged a few messages, and on December 1st, they decided to meet in person. It was a Saturday night. Grace was staying at a hostel called Base Backpackers, and she had been in good spirits, sharing updates and photos of her travels with her family. But this night would be different. Just before 6 p.m. on December 1st, Grace left the hostel and headed into the city center. She was dressed in a black knee-length dress, white shoes, and carrying a small handbag, ready for what she hoped would be an exciting night out. Her excitement was palpable as she texted her friend back home, saying she clicked with him so well and that he was an oil manager who lived in a hotel. The date was set, and Grace was eager to meet him. Grace and Jesse met at Sky City, a large entertainment complex known for its casinos, restaurants, and bars. It was the perfect place for a first date. They spent some time together there, drinking and chatting. From all appearances, the evening was going smoothly. At one point, Grace even sent another message to her friend, Amina, letting her know everything was fine and that she was enjoying herself. Around 9 p.m., they moved on to another bar, the Bluestone Room. This was a quieter place, with a more intimate atmosphere. Grace and Jesse continued to chat and laugh, and it seemed like the evening was going well. But by this point, Grace's family had already begun to notice something strange. She had always been in constant contact with them, sending messages and sharing photos of her travels. But now they hadn't heard from her for a few hours, and it was unlike her to go silent, and especially on her birthday eve. As the night wore on, Grace and Jesse left the Bluestone Room and headed down the street together. It was a chilly evening, and they walked arm in arm, heading toward the City Life Hotel where Jesse was staying. Around 9:30 p.m., the pair arrived at the hotel, and Grace was last seen entering the building with him. This was the last confirmed sighting of her. In the days leading up to that moment, Grace had been on top of the world, sharing her adventure with her family and friends. She had been making memories, ticking off items from her travel bucket list, and finding joy in every new place she visited. But now, just hours before her 22nd birthday, everything would change. Before we continue, if you're captivated by unraveling chilling mysteries and delving into real-life crime stories, don't forget to hit that like button. It helps us bring more cases into the spotlight. Make sure to subscribe and tap the notification bell so you're always in the loop. You never know which mystery we'll crack next. And trust me, you don't want to be left in the dark. And if you know someone as obsessed with true crime as you are, share this video, because some mysteries deserve more attention, and together we can uncover the truth. December 2nd, 2018, the day after Grace Millane's 22nd birthday. Her family had been trying to reach her all morning, eager to wish her a happy birthday. But Grace wasn't responding. Her phone went straight to voicemail. That wasn't like her. As the hours passed and still no word from her, Her brother Declan began to grow increasingly worried. Declan's instincts told him something was wrong, and by the evening, the situation had escalated enough that Grace's parents, David and Gillian, reported her missing to the police. New Zealand authorities took the case seriously but didn't initially grasp the gravity of the situation. Maybe she had stayed with new friends? Maybe she just lost track of time. Her hostel, base backpackers, confirmed she never checked back in on December 1st. That was the first real clue. But still, the police weren't ready to jump to conclusions. At first, the idea of foul play was far from the minds of the officers involved in the investigation. But then, things started to take a darker turn. Then investigators turned to the city's vast surveillance network. They pulled security footage and pieced together Grace's final movements. And there it was, chilling footage. Grace, hand in hand with a man, heading toward the City Life Hotel. She was smiling, laughing, seemingly at ease. Then came the first red flag. Surveillance footage captured Grace entering the City Life Hotel at 9:30 p.m. But she was never seen leaving. The footage ended there. Jesse, on the other hand, was later seen leaving the hotel on his own the following morning. Investigators questioned Jesse, but his story was too neat. He claimed they had parted ways on the street, each heading in different directions. But the investigators weren't convinced. There was no sign of Grace returning to her hostel, and her belongings were still at the base hostel, which was odd. Detectives were starting to realize that something more sinister could be at play. But it was when they looked into Jesse's background that the story began to shift into something darker. Jesse Kempson had only recently arrived in Auckland himself, and his actions seemed to raise more questions than answers. The pieces were starting to fall into place, but there was still so much more to discover. It was December 9th when police launched a search in the Waitakere Ranges, a remote area about 12 miles outside of Auckland. The authorities had been following leads from CCTV footage and other sources. They had reason to believe that Grace's body might be somewhere in the area. The search was difficult. The terrain was dense and treacherous, but just after 4 p.m. that day, officers made a grim discovery. They found Grace's body hidden in a shallow grave near Scenic Drive, deep in the bush. The body was in an advanced state of decomposition, but forensic examiners quickly confirmed her identity. Crime scene investigators analyzed the surrounding area for trace evidence, looking for any signs of struggle or attempts to conceal the body. Her family, who had been anxiously waiting for news, now had the confirmation they feared most. Grace was gone, and her life had been cut short in the most brutal way imaginable. The discovery sent shockwaves through the country. New Zealand, a place known for its beauty and peacefulness, was now the scene of a tragic crime that no one could fully comprehend. Grace's family, who had been holding on to hope, were shattered. It wasn't just a missing person case anymore. It was a murder investigation. Meanwhile, Jesse Kempson, the man who had been with Grace that night, was now at the center of the investigation. Authorities moved quickly to arrest him on December 8th after tracing his movements and discovering that he had rented a car, bought cleaning supplies, and made unsettling purchases in the days after Grace's disappearance. Jesse had been acting suspiciously, and investigators believed he was trying to cover his tracks. A forensic team combed through Jesse's hotel room, uncovering key crime scene evidence. Bloodstains were detected on the carpet using luminol testing, confirming an attempt to tamper with evidence. Investigators also found biological traces, strengthening the case against him. Jesse was the one responsible for Grace's death. But what happened that night? Why had he killed her? As police pieced together the evidence, a troubling picture began to emerge. Jesse's behavior seemed to be calculated, almost cold. The investigation was moving quickly now. With Grace's body found and Jesse under arrest, it was clear that the case was no longer just about a missing backpacker. It was a murder case, and it was getting more sinister by the day. In the days following Grace's body being discovered, the world began to learn more about Jesse Kempson's past. His lies, his manipulations, and his history of troubling behavior were all coming to light. Police were no longer looking at him as just a suspect. They were looking at him as a man with a dark, dangerous side. The investigation was just beginning, but one thing was certain. Grace Millane's life had been tragically taken, and the truth behind her death was about to be revealed in ways that no one could have imagined. As the investigation into Grace Millane's murder continued, a web of conflicting accounts and bizarre coincidences began to emerge, leaving detectives and the public alike grappling with the truth. At first, the story seemed straightforward: a Tinder date gone wrong, a tragic accident, and a brutal murder. But as the case unraveled, strange twists and turns would blur the line between fact and fiction, leaving many wondering what really happened that night. It all started with the man at the center of it all, Jesse Kempson. Initially, his version of events was simple enough. He even went so far as to say he had tried to contact Grace the following day, but she had unmatched him on the app. No harm, no foul, right? But it didn't stop there. Jesse had a troubling psychological profile, one that clashed with the charming persona he projected. Friends, family, and even former employers came forward, each revealing a different side to Jesse. Some said he was charming, a smooth talker who could easily win people over. Others, however, painted a darker picture. He had been known to lie about almost everything: his job, his family, his relationships. One former landlord even described him as a pathological liar. He told people he was a top manager at Woolworths when, in reality, he was relying on government benefits to pay his rent. But it wasn't just lies that Jesse had a habit of telling. It was manipulation. In one particularly disturbing revelation, a woman who had dated Jesse years earlier came forward with her story. She explained how he had been violent and controlling, threatening her on multiple occasions. She described how he had once held a knife to her throat during an argument. Despite her attempts to report him, the authorities had never taken her claims seriously. At the time, there hadn't been enough evidence to pursue charges. Now, this woman's chilling experience seemed eerily similar to the events leading up to Grace's murder. As more witnesses came forward, more conflicting stories began to surface. Two individuals claimed they had seen Grace at a bus stop on the evening of December 1st, well after her disappearance. They said she appeared calm and unbothered, seemingly walking alone. This testimony seemed like it could be a breakthrough, proof that Grace had been alive after she parted ways with Jesse. But there was a major flaw in their story: the security footage. The very footage that showed Grace entering the hotel with Jesse also showed that she was never seen leaving. In fact, there was no trace of her after she entered that hotel. As the theories continued to develop, the police found themselves tangled in a web of misdirection and unreliable witnesses. The conflicting accounts made it even harder to pinpoint what had truly happened to Grace that night. Some speculated that Jesse had acted out of some kind of rage or impulse, while others suggested the possibility that Grace had been the victim of a tragic accident during what was supposed to be a consensual sexual encounter. But even this theory didn't line up with the evidence. Forensic experts combed through the evidence. The autopsy revealed a brutal truth. Grace had been strangled. Bruises on her arms and chest suggested she had been restrained. The pressure on her neck? It was severe. Death wasn't instant, it took minutes. This wasn't an accident, it was deliberate. Dr. Simon Stables, the pathologist who conducted the autopsy, gave a damning account of Grace's cause of death. This was not an accident, he explained. It was an intentional act of violence, requiring considerable force. The injuries were consistent with someone being pinned down and strangled. The expert's analysis painted a picture of a calculated murder, not a tragic accident. But many still clung to the idea that Grace's death was somehow connected to a rough sex encounter gone wrong. Jesse's defense team latched onto this theory. They claimed that Grace had asked Jesse to engage in consensual bondage and choking, something she allegedly enjoyed in past relationships. They argued that this was all part of some sexual misadventure that went too far. This claim sent shockwaves through the trial, with many people questioning the morality of using rough sex as a defense for murder. To some, it felt like an attempt to blame Grace for her own death, an attempt to excuse Jesse's actions and paint him as the victim of a sexual misunderstanding. But this defense didn't hold water under the weight of the evidence. Forensic experts debunked this argument, pointing out that the bruising on Grace's body was far too severe for a consensual act. The injuries were consistent with someone struggling for their life, not someone voluntarily engaging in a dangerous sexual encounter. As the trial continued, the jury was forced to wrestle with the conflicting testimonies and the mounting evidence against Jesse. It was clear that the case was more complicated than a simple dating tragedy gone wrong. There were so many layers to this story. Jesse's lies, his history of manipulative behavior, the disturbing accounts from previous women, and the shocking forensic evidence that painted a clear picture of a brutal murder. With each new revelation, the story of Grace's death became more twisted and tragic. The jury, faced with a mountain of evidence and conflicting testimonies, had to decide whether Jesse Kempson was the man who had taken Grace's life in cold blood, or whether he was the victim of a series of unfortunate misunderstandings. It was a case full of red herrings, misdirection, and lies, but the truth was starting to emerge, and it was far darker than anyone could have anticipated. The trial began on November 4, 2019, at the Auckland High Court, and the opening statements set the stage for an emotionally charged legal battle. The prosecution wasted no time in dismantling the defense's claim. Crown Solicitor Brian Dickey presented a damning case. He argued that Jesse Kempson had murdered Grace in a calculated, deliberate act. According to the prosecution, Jesse had used considerable force to strangle Grace, leaving bruises on her arms and chest. This wasn't a case of rough sex, this was murder. To drive the point home, Dickey presented forensic evidence from the post-mortem, which revealed that Grace had been asphyxiated. The defense in turn brought in an expert witness, pathologist Fintan Garavan, who contradicted the prosecution's conclusions. Garavan suggested that Grace's injuries could have been consistent with a consensual choking session, pointing out that there were no defensive wounds on Grace's body. This claim, however, fell flat under scrutiny. The jury heard from multiple experts, and most agreed that the force used to strangle Grace was deliberate and sustained. There was no way this could have been an accident. Meanwhile, the prosecution continued to paint a chilling picture of Jesse's actions after the murder. They presented evidence showing that, in the hours after Grace's death, Jesse had gone on a shopping spree. He purchased a suitcase, cleaning supplies, and a rug doctor to remove the bloodstains from his hotel room. Jesse had also made disturbing online searches, including how to get rid of bodies and flesh-eating birds. These actions, the prosecution argued, showed that Jesse knew exactly what he had done, and he was doing everything he could to cover it up. Despite his defense's attempt to claim that Grace had willingly participated in risky sexual activity, the jury saw through the layers of lies and manipulations. On November 22, 2019, after just 5 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a unanimous guilty verdict. Jesse Kempson was convicted of the murder of Grace Millane. The courtroom erupted as Grace's family, who had been enduring months of pain and uncertainty, finally got the justice they had been waiting for. For Grace's mother, Millane, the verdict brought a bittersweet sense of closure. While the truth was finally out, it couldn't bring Grace back. "We are devastated beyond words," Jillian said. "No amount of justice will ever bring our Grace back." Jesse Kempson was sentenced to life in prison, with a minimum non-parole period of 17 years. It was a sentence that brought some sense of justice to Grace's family, but the pain of losing her remained. Following his conviction for the murder of Grace Millane, Jesse Kempson faced 2 additional trials for separate offenses against other women. In October 2020, he was found guilty of multiple charges, including sexual violation, assault with a weapon, and threatening to kill his former partner. The following month, he was convicted of raping another British tourist he had met on Tinder, 8 months prior to Millane's death. These convictions resulted in an additional 11 years of imprisonment, to be served concurrently with his life sentence for Millane's murder. Jesse Kempson's conviction brought some sense of justice, but the impact of the case extended beyond the courtroom. New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern publicly addressed the tragedy, offering a heartfelt apology to Grace's family. She acknowledged the deep sorrow and shame the country felt. She emphasized that New Zealand prided itself on being a safe and welcoming place, especially for visitors. Though the trial concluded with a conviction, the true motives behind Jesse's actions remain a mystery. What we do know is that Grace's life was tragically cut short by a man who thought he could get away with murder. And for her family, the road to justice, though painful, was the only path to some semblance of peace. But despite the conviction, some mysteries remain unsolved. What led him to target Grace? Could anyone have seen the warning signs earlier? And was this simply a case of a twisted individual taking advantage of a vulnerable woman? Or was there more at play than we understand? But now we want to hear from you. Do you think justice was truly served in this case? Was the trial enough to bring closure to Grace's family? Or are there still unanswered questions that need to be addressed? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Was it the end of a chapter for Grace's family, or is there more we need to uncover? If you want more deep dives into chilling true crime cases, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And if you found this case as disturbing as we did, share it with someone who needs to hear it.